This is Scott Richmond.
And Arnie Sherman.
You're listening to What Do You Know on Newstalk KGVO, AM 1290 and 98.3 FM. Arnie Sherman, Sunday morning is here. Good morning.
Good morning to you. Normally I have a lot of little quips to say and talk about the weather and sports.
Right.
And, how the Yankees are doing or how the preseason is going for the Grizz as we're heading into preseason. But we have a serious topic today, and so I would like to maybe put that in a broader perspective. We have Anne Fogel joining us today, who's the sister of Marc Fogel, who's for the last 1,000 days plus has been in jail in Russia charged with drug trafficking, even though the charge is based on he brought a half an ounce of medical marijuana with a prescription with him to the place he lived. He's been living and working in Russia since 2012 at the Anglo-American school there.
Right.
So it's a serious situation, exacerbated on August 1st when there was a hostage exchange and, 3 Americans were released and he wasn't one of them. And so we have Anne here today who's been championing the family's, activities to try to get her brother and, their son and released. He's 63 years old. He's been sentenced to 14 years.
Is that a long sentence for something?
Murderers there don't get 14 years.
So it's a long
for nothing. And, it's part of the problem of when you're living and working in a dictatorship and you think you're under the radar or you're not you're just a teacher, right?
Right. He's a teacher from Pennsylvania, Marc Fogel.
He's a teacher from Pennsylvania, and he's been teaching at the Anglo-American school for 12 years. He was, this was his last year. He was going to retire. He put in this last year, the year 2021 was going to be his last year so he could get his full retirement from that organization because he had worked for 27 years around the world teaching in other countries. And all of a sudden one day you come back to, do your job and you're arrested and, on what I would have to say in general is trumped up charges, right?
Totally.
And can't get him out for whatever reason. I think today we're going to talk to
Anne Fogel.
Anne Fogel and ask her what's going on and why does she think that's the case. Brittany Griner got convicted of a similar offense a year later and got out.
Right.
Right. She was sentenced to multiple years in prison. The 3 people that were released on August 1st, the ex-Marine Paul Whelan and Evan Gershkovich, who was a Wall Street Journal reporter, and another journalist that was also sentenced. They were sentenced to 16 years, and 6.5 years. Got out, Marc Fogel's still there. So we're gonna, I think, look into today what are the realities of this? What does Anne think the reasons are? Is it more complicated than it looks on the surface? Is there something else going on? I mean, it's hard to fathom. But I do have to say, that there are at least 6 or more Americans still being held there. There's, hostage diplomacy is on the rise, so they like to have, hostages to, in their back pocket, so to speak. Russia has over 300 political prisoners. They have 400 religious prisoners, and they got 3,000 people in jail that are related to trumped-up, politically motivated charges, like if you spoke at a rally or if you showed up to put flowers on somebody's grave. You can be arrested and put in prison for that.
A dictatorship.
Yeah, it's a dictatorship.
And refresh our audience's memory. You spent a lot of time in Russia.
I traveled there fairly regularly for 14 years.
Right.
And I had an apartment in Moscow for a number of years during the transition. I left before Putin took over. So most of my time was under Gorbachev and Yeltsin, which were a little bit more flexible times.
Right.
They were pre-democracy. That was in, Gorbachev was there under what was called perestroika, which was, really means sort of the opening up of
right.
And then Yeltsin was the first elected, appointed and then elected person. And then,
right.
And then we had, Putin's been there for over 20 years, is running the country.
God.
He may be at this point the longest tenured leader in the world. I don't know who's longer that really runs anything.
It's crazy to think about. Our guest, Missoula's own, actually, she'll be here in the studio. Anne Fogel, her brother Marc Fogel, is again currently being detained as a prisoner of the Russian government, and his name came up, a couple weeks ago during this whole exchange of prisoners and and unfortunately was kept back. So it's going to be a really good conversation. We'll get to know who Marc is and kind of understand his story and understand what she's been working on to try to get him free.
And importantly, for our listeners who at some point, on the political spectrum, may think, Russia's right in the Ukrainian discussion, and, we have some political leaders who support Putin. I mean, this is a good example of what happens when you have somebody like Putin running a country.
Completely.
It's a police state, and it's a terrorist state, and it's a dictatorship. And this is what you get as a byproduct.
This is what you want, a dictatorship. This is what you get.
This is what you get.
Our guest is Anne Fogel. Back after these words. Arnie Sherman, we are back with our guest Anne Fogel.
And welcome to the show.
Thanks so much.
We've used a little bit of our intro time to kind of put this in the proper, broader perspective. But just in summary, your brother, who had, I guess, for the last 27 years or more than that, has been an international educator and teacher.
Correct.
And since 2012 had been working for the Anglo-American School in Moscow. And in 2021 was going back for his last year before he retired, and was detained at Sheremetyevo Airport, and they found roughly a half an ounce of cannabis that was legally prescribed by a physician, and that led to him being charged with possession of drugs and dealing drugs and smuggling and all that sort of stuff.
They made a lot of allegations that the charges are for possession and smuggling.
Possession and smuggling. Had what I want to say is a trumped up trial and sentenced to 14 years, which, as I know from my experiences in Russia, I spent 14 years working there off and on. I mean, murderers get less than that often.
Correct.
And so that happened in 2021. He was sentenced when? In 2023?
He was sentenced he was arrested August 2021 and then sentenced in June 16th of 2022.
2022, and he's been now over 1,000 days.
Yeah, it'll be on the 14th of this month, so it'll be 3 years.
Right. And so on August 1st, there was announced by the Biden administration a complicated 6-country exchange, which involved 16 people, 3 fairly prominent Americans, journalists from the Wall Street Journal, not Paul Whelan, but Evan Gershkovich, and then Paul Whelan, who was an ex-Marine, and then Alsu Kurmasheva, who is also a journalist, and they were part of the exchange, but your brother wasn't.
Yeah, which was just really so surprising because the Moscow Times ran an article that said that they were going to be releasing, potentially 20 to 30 prisoners. And we thought, how could he not be included in that? And it was erroneous. They didn't release that many. How many did they totally release?
16.
16.
Right.
And they weren't all Americans. I mean,
right.
It was a complicated, as
including
I said.
somebody that didn't want out. Which
why didn't somebody
is mind-blowing.
Not one of the Americans, one of the other hostages.
No, a Russian who was there as a conscientious objector. So that was I had a brutal week last week.
Ooh.
And that's where we were introduced to you through.
Yeah.
Well, I saw you on CNN. Mm-hmm. So last week was, to your point, fairly brutal. It was brutal.
Yeah.
How much press did you do, and how many people were you speaking to, and what was tell us about that?
I think I hit every major news organization, including BBC. Did a CNN International and an MSNBC International, and then including and PBS.
Is someone coordinating that on your behalf?
No, which is pretty interesting because I'm a little ADHD in it.
We all are.
And under like the kind of pressure of last week, it was like I was,
Sure.
meticulously writing everything down in times, and I missed a lot. I missed an interview with Anderson Cooper because I wasn't checking. Like I have too many platforms now on my phone, and checking things.
Sure.
There was something else that I missed as well. I was just like I didn't even see.
Is someone helping
the request?
So someone's not necessarily helping you coordinate that, but does the State Department talk to you about what you should talk about?
No.
Or this is all you
No.
to them? There's no intermediary.
No intermediary.
Right. And this was not your, vocation or advocate.
Right.
No.
I mean,
No.
what do you do when
What
you're
is
not
your
doing
background?
this?
Well, I have been a business owner in the past. I had my husband and I had several businesses. We started Omni Bars, which you probably don't remember, and my husband owned Salt Studios, and then my husband died, and we have a family ranch in Ovando, and so I spend time up there.
And for the last 3 years, this hellish
for the
situation.
last 3
you've
years,
been-
this is now my job.
What has been your communication with your brother?
He calls the Embassy Moscow, and Embassy Moscow forwards him through.
To your mobile.
to
but
my
not very
mobile.
often, right?
He can. Well, he's living in a large penal colony,
Right.
and there are a lot of people that want to use the phone. So when he can use it, he does.
Right. He's in like a
sometimes-
barracks situation with like
Yes.
75 people, right?
Yeah, correct.
Yeah, that's the typical setup.
Mm-hmm.
And do you know where he is?
Yes, he's in Rybinsk.
Rybinsk.
And how often do you communicate with him?
Sometimes we're talking, once a week.
Okay.
He is incredibly depressed right now, and he's just said point blank, "Listen, he doesn't have the energy to talk. He does not.
Yeah. There's no country club.
He's curled up.
Right. There's no country club experience over there
No.
for somebody like this who's been put in.
Sure.
Right.
So let me. I want to lay out more of the situation that we're dealing with. There's an office of special presidential envoy for hostage affairs,
Correct.
and they generally go through a process with as they investigate cases. And from what I've read and know, that usually someone has to be wrongfully detained, or they have to be judged that they were wrongfully detained in order for them to get a priority response from the government.
Right.
And Mark hasn't received that.
He has not received
And
that.
do you know why, or what have they told you about that?
They have really clammed up on this, and there was actually an act put through the House of Representatives.
Levinson Act?
Well, there's the Levinson Act, which is a law, which is
Right.
it's a kind of a no accountability law.
Right.
Actually, the House of Representatives pushed through the Marc Fogel report that demanded that Secretary of State Antony Blinken respond to why he hasn't been designated, and they produced a incredibly flawed document. It was as if they had not read really. They were not familiar with the case. They were not like they hadn't done their homework.
Right.
That's what it seemed like.
Right.
My mother responded. I have a 95-year-old mother in Pennsylvania. She responded with a lawsuit.
Have you talked to the National Security Advisor, Jake Sullivan?
I have.
you talked to him?
I've been in his office, and my sister-in-law has been in his office twice.
And what is their response to you have been up to now?
His response, and is that we're working on this. He repeats, we're working on this. We're working on this. I don't think that Marc has actually been. He's never been prioritized, though. You know, the Levinson Act, in the ideal world, is designed for journalists and for dissidents. But when they designated Brittany Griner,
which happened a year after your brother. I mean, she got detained in 2022 initially, so
Right.
Your brother was
Correct.
already there.
Yeah, he had already been there. But when she was designated, they changed the rules. They set a new precedent, and they're really unwilling to acknowledge that, I guess. And Brittany Griner didn't belong there either.
No,
I mean,
no,
like,
right.
I'm not saying that.
But she was in and out relatively quickly compared to your brother's
oh my
situation,
gosh, yes,
of course.
Yes.
2022 she was in, she was out in 2023.
I think February of 2022, and then released 9 months later.
Yeah.
Right. So
Same year. Yeah, December of 2020.
Right, and the Levinson Act has, as I read about it, know about it, has about 11 different criteria
Correct.
that you have to meet certain,
Yeah.
at least one or two of them. And your
Marc-
brother, how many of those criteria do you believe your brother meets?
About 8.
About 8 of the 11. So
Yes.
he should be
I believe that.
right. And
I
maybe,
believe he should be designated. Yes. But the State Department doesn't not, or they don't want to. They give you a non-committal as the answer.
right. Well, he doesn't. The other 3 people released had organizations behind them, right?
Paul Whelan did not actually
Really?
have an organization behind him.
But he
that
was
I
an
know of.
ex-Marine. He had
Yeah,
that kind of panache going for him.
He had other things going. He had 4 passports. He has 4 passports. So essentially, he had 4 countries working for his release. Although he was in there for 5 years.
Sure.
Yes. No, he was.
So I'm. Yeah.
Do you think there's? I mean, it's hard to. I'm sure you've speculated and thought about it hundreds of times. The
Oh.
Russians are stockpiling chips for future deals because they have plenty of other people they'd like to have released in other countries. They got some,
Yeah.
terrorists released in this negotiation.
Yeah.
Serious terrorists,
Yes.
as opposed to,
Yes.
a journalist or
Yes.
your brother who was teacher,
An educator.
Yeah.
an educator, right?
Tell us a little bit about your brother and your relationship. Where did you grow up? And
We grew up in Butler, Pennsylvania. As a note, my mother met Donald Trump when he was in Butler, Pennsylvania, and was with him right before he was shot.
oh my
Wow.
God.
She was sitting directly in front of him.
Wow, whoa.
Holy mackerel.
Yeah, it's crazy.
The Butler, Pennsylvania.
Yeah. So, we're trying we're trying to have a nonpartisan
Sure.
approach to this because we certainly can't afford to be partisan.
You
Right,
can
no.
at this point.
We cannot
You've
afford
talked
to be partisan.
obviously to the Montana congressional delegation. You've talked to Tester and
Absolutely.
Daines and everyone
Tester
else.
and Daines have been phenomenal.
Right.
Phenomenal.
Right.
Yeah.
But
I
tell-
mean,
yeah. I
and
was just gonna-
Paul's not even. I mean, you're a
Marc.
resident, but excuse me, Mark's not a resident of Montana.
Marc is not a resident, but his son is a resident.
Oh,
Of
as well.
Montana. So tell us
Yes,
a little
he
bit.
is.
Go back a little for our audience.
Sure.
Talk a little bit about he's your older brother. How
Yes.
many siblings? Tell us about
I have
your
a
family.
brother. I have a brother and a sister. I'm the youngest. Marc and I, but we had a very, very normal, very middle class upbringing in Butler, Pennsylvania. My dad worked for the Pennsylvania Department of Transportation. Very middle.
Right.
He was the first one of his 5 siblings. Well, in his family to ever go to college.
Okay.
My mother is of Italian. Her parents were immigrants.
Came through Ellis Island.
Came through Ellis Island. I have, and I'm not joking, I have 52 first cousins.
are they here or are they in Italy or mixture?
mainly here. We have relatives in Italy as well.
23 and me is a
Yeah.
a crapshoot with you.
Yeah. No doubt. I might have more.
I have more. That's true.
We all are around the same age.
Yeah. Right.
Keep going. So grew up in Butler.
Yeah.
Brother older sister.
Yes.
What does she do?
My sister was for Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, is a bit of a corporate giant.
Tell us about her.
My sister's very bright. Graduated first in her class from Carnegie Mellon in engineering, and then went back to do a degree in industrial administration. She's just classic oldest child overachiever. Just doesn't take no for an answer.
Is she working still or retired?
She's on several corporate boards now. She's a force. She's absolutely a force.
And she is actively working with you to.
Oh yeah. We are in this together.
Got it.
She is absolutely the brains of the operation.
And you grew up there, but where did you go to school? Where did you study? What's your background?
I went to Edinburgh State University in Edinburgh, Pennsylvania.
Okay.
And then I went to the University of Pittsburgh and got a teaching, have an English degree, and then got a teaching certification. Lived in South Africa for a time, worked there, and also have the travel bug. It's a genetic
Arnie.
disorder.
What brought you out here to Montana?
I had a lift. I had been in Africa for some time, and I came home and really wasn't ready to face life in Pennsylvania at that point in time.
Yes.
I met a woman who her husband had been an art professor at the U of M, and she said, "Listen, I'll pay your way across the country if you help me with my kids."
So this was what, like beginning of the 90s? 91.
Like as a nanny.
Right.
Yeah. So I came.
And you met your husband out here.
We did, and we
A
came.
Montanan? Was he a
Pennsylvania? Pennsylvania to Montana via Tucson.
So he was from Tucson?
No, he was.
He
was from some East Coast state, but he was working as a professor. He was
At the U.
At the U,
Right.
in art.
When did you go to Tucson?
Well, that was just like
The stop on the way.
yeah.
I love Tucson, by the way. There's a lot of
on the way.
I think there's a lot of shared commonality between Missoula and Tucson.
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
It reminds me.
Yeah. Well,
Okay, keep going, though.
It's a college town.
It's a college town, but it feels similar.
It's bigger.
I heard my first canyon wren in Tucson.
Wow.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I'm a bit of a birder, so my last name means bird.
Does it?
Right, Vogel
Yeah.
in German.
Yeah.
So you came here in 91 and been here ever since.
Yeah. Well, I went back to graduate school. I met my husband here. We both went back to graduate school and did some more running around, and then we came back. We were, as I told you, we have a family ranch in Ovando. We built a house out there in '99, and when we weren't here, we were here, just
Sure.
kind of commuting back and forth all the time. And then brought our kids back in 2004 and enrolled everybody in school.
And Mark's son is here. What does he do here?
Mark's son is graduated from the Anglo-American School in Moscow. His brother also did.
Yes.
Wow.
He came to MSU to do engineering school, of which he's graduated from.
And he's decided to stay in Montana.
Decided to stay
Tell
in
us a
Montana.
little bit about Mark. So
Mark is he's very charismatic. He's you wanna hang out with him.
right.
He's really fun. He is. He's got a very, very thorough understanding of history. I wouldn't say ancient history, but like he's
Sure.
he's been teaching IB history
Right.
for 36 years.
Got it.
He's an avid reader of history. He's fun to talk to,
Right.
and he has done. He's taught so many nationalities that he has been able to utilize his students in understanding their cultures.
Wow.
Has
Right.
done an incredible amount of traveling. He did his student teaching in London.
Right.
Then he took his first job. Well, he taught in Washington, D.C. in an inner city school in Washington for 3 years. Then he went to Guadalajara. He was in Guadalajara for 5 years. And then he went to Malaysia. He was in Malaysia for 7 years, Kuala Lumpur. And then,
Talk about the travel bug.
Right.
yeah.
So he's had a lot of those experiences.
But you're-
And he's
Yeah.
married?
Married, 2 kids.
And what's his wife been doing
what's-
all this? Is she part? Well, obviously she's part of all of this.
Absolutely, she's absolutely part of this, but she has shied away from the media. It's been it's an incredibly traumatic
Well, of course.
situation
Sure.
that we are in and day out. It's
Right.
like it's not.
And if even if you're talking once a week, there's 6 days we don't know what's going on.
Right.
It's not like
Right.
It's
Right.
he's
Right.
isolated.
Right.
He's in a penal colony.
Yes.
So I want to get back to what happened. So I've been through Sheremetyevo Airport over 100 times.
Mm-hmm.
It's very random whether they search you or don't search you or whatever.
Right.
Was there somebody? Was there an informant? Was there some?
There
what,
was-
What happened that led to him being searched?
There was an informant that was from the trial record. You can read this if you can read Russian. Perhaps you do.
No, not very well, but I.
He was a disgruntled employee from the school. He was probably an FSB agent. I think that the Kremlin had their eye on the school, the property of the school, the influence of the school for some time.
Right.
Like all the diplomats sent, a lot of diplomats sent their kids there. A lot of oligarchs sent their kids there. I mean, and my brother teaching this history, IB history, was,
He was being honest when he taught history. He wasn't shading it necessarily.
He wasn't.
Towards what they would want to hear, the government.
He was not teaching the Kremlin line of history for certain.
Understood.
So was this informant disgruntled about the school in general or specifically?
He was fired. He had been fired. He was an
so he was
an
going
IT
to get back
guy.
at the school somehow.
He was getting back at the school,
And
but I think that he was
personal-
probably encouraged to get back at the school.
Right. And Mark just became the vehicle for that.
Yeah, Mark was the star. I think probably Mark was a star teacher there.
Sure.
Like I said, his classes were very difficult to get into. He was also the girls' softball coach. He's a very larger than life personality.
Right, and attracted students, and he was popular and all of that.
Yes.
What kind of person is he? Like you
He's,
say, he's gregarious. He's outgoing.
Yeah.
He's very sensitive. It sounds like.
He's a very engaged
So he
and
feels a
engaging
lot.
person.
He feels a lot.
Oh, absolutely.
So,
Very compassionate. Very. A lot of his female students have talked about him very much being very pretty strong feminist.
Right.
Which they don't like over there either.
I'm
I
sorry
mean, if
to
you
hear.
have an informant in there reporting back to the government,
Right.
and they're saying,
Yeah,
"Well, who is
Right.
Those are-
spewing non-supportive propaganda," as they would
Right.
describe it?
Sure.
He might have said, "Well, the
Yeah.
American there is. It's easy to pick on an
Yeah.
American there
Yeah.
because there are not that many over there at this point. After
Right.
Putin's reign of
Right.
terror."
And they debated. They heavily debated whether they would return because also the final year of teaching, the school, Anglo-American school, had been under the umbrella of the U.S. Embassy. Mm-hmm. The teachers were given diplomatic immunity.
Passports and yeah.
But they told them the year before, hey, listen, sell your cars now, because if you get into a traffic accident,
It's your fault.
it's your fault, and you will be, So they gave them some warning. They probably did not give them more warning, an adequate warning.
Sure.
A detailed
warning.
Of what if
what that could look like.
Right. Yeah.
Mark,
was his wife with him when it happened?
Yes, she was a teacher too.
No, but was she at the airport when this happened?
When he got detained, she was with him.
Yes.
So she got on the flight or stayed back after he was detained.
She was sent. The school had sent a driver for them.
Oh, so they were returning.
Yeah,
Yes,
they were returning.
They were
returning for their final retirement year of teaching.
Let's quick ID. Our guest is Anne Fogel. Her brother Marc is currently detained in a Russian penal colony, and we are talking to her about her last week, but really the last 3 years.
Mm-hmm.
Are there, from your conversations with Marc, are there other Americans in this penal colony with him, or is he the only one?
But there's an oligarch whose kid Marc taught.
Well, yes, you can see it doesn't matter if you're a billionaire. It's not going to do you any good in that place. He doesn't have any influence, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, he's there with Marc and with other people. So good point, actually. What other channels can you pursue to try to get Marc released?
Incredibly, Michael McFaul from Bozeman,
right, who used to be ambassador,
was the ambassador of Russia. He's, we have explored.
I was going to say
we have explored many channels. Like I said, my sister is an overachiever. We have absolutely, and there's we have a lobbyist who graduated from the university that my brother did, Indiana University of Pennsylvania, who has also stepped up and brought her DC game. So we have an incredible array of people who have volunteered for us, but we still don't have the NBA behind us, and we still don't have the Wall Street Journal behind us. So,
so let me ask you this:
factor.
Michael McFaul is a knowledgeable, savvy guy, one of the most savvy guys out there about Russia.
Right.
What has he said about this? I mean, he got involved. What does he think?
He's been very involved with us. He's one of Marc's former. Well, actually, one of Jane's former students made a documentary film. He went to Chapman University Film School, and Michael McFaul was interviewed for that.
Right.
He doesn't. Michael doesn't get it. Why they're not? Why they didn't pull him out? He's not in the State Department anymore.
No, I know he's not.
So he's. He has friends in high places, but out
of sight, out of mind.
Yeah, they're shutting them down.
So is there something else? Do you speculate there's something else at play in here? Is it the Russians didn't want to put him on the table? They wanted to hold him?
I feel like Marc is caught between a couple of things in the United States because the U.S. hasn't prioritized him. He took medical marijuana. He took marijuana in to Russia. So he broke a law.
Right.
Even though it was prescribed, and the tragedy, of course, is that had he used the drugs that he had been prescribed for his many back surgeries, hip surgeries, shoulder surgeries, knee, he would be in a gutter dead because he has been prescribed so many opiates. And certainly for Western Pennsylvania, that opiate epidemic is profound.
Sure.
So
So he helped himself by going an alternate route.
He took an alternate route. He felt that it was healthier for him. He felt that it was in the long run was a better alternative.
Right. But it's not really the marijuana per se, because if he would have come in even with an opiate prescription, they might have done the same thing. I'm pretty sure. I mean, if he had because they've arrested other people who have had, Schedule 1 or 2 or 3 drugs that have been prescribed for pain.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Perhaps.
Yeah,
Perhaps.
My guess, just based on my experience there, if it didn't matter, the prescription wasn't the protection for marijuana,
right.
And if they wanted to get him, they would have found a vial of pills.
And
said,
I think that's that is the bottom line, is that they were going to get him.
They were going to get him.
They were going to get him.
They're going to find something.
What can our audience and what can we do to help? Right? Like, is there a letter that we need to send to? Like, tell us a little bit about some of the channels that we should all help with.
Well, writing a letter to Secretary of State Antony Blinken, writing a letter to the president, writing a letter to his wife, who's a teacher.
Right.
Those are all things that we have been doing now for quite some time. They have, the president didn't actually say Mark's name.
No.
But Jake Sullivan did.
Mm-hmm.
And the more his name is spoken, the better off.
Sure.
We believe he
Absolutely.
will be.
Well, there's always a fine line.
You heard Paul Whelan's name.
Yes.
When Griner was released, that's all you heard was Paul Whelan's name.
There's always a fine line between, and you only can look in retrospect to tell whether the path you followed is correct. Sometimes you raise the visibility and you raise the stakes. They may want somebody in return if they think you want him bad enough. The Russians will say, well, then we want 3 people.
Right.
Sometimes quiet diplomacy works, but in this case, it's been 1,000 days.
Yeah.
So you're not sure that quiet approach.
We kind of ran out on that.
Yeah, you ran out on that. But I can see what, you make it a big issue like Brittany Griner was or Wall Street Journal journalists. I mean, they got a lot of people in return for this, for the 60 people that were released.
And your married name is not Fogel. That's your maiden name.
Well, I didn't change my name, but I had.
I'm just curious.
Yeah. My husband was Cooper Burchinal.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
He died in 2015.
So there are other Americans there. What is Sullivan or these guys say they're working on for all the other Americans that are in there? Do they tell you that, or do you any priority for Mark, or you just don't?
They're just they're a hodgepodge of people there.
Mm-hmm.
And Mark, went in before the war. He's now, I think he's, of the Americans, I don't know if he's been there the longest.
Right.
I'm not intimately aware.
Knowledge about the other cases. You're focused on Mark.
There's Dave Barnes.
Right.
There's Andrei Kachtorian. There's
there's another woman American.
There's the Russian American woman.
Right.
So there are Americans, and then there are dual citizens, and certainly the State Department says if you have an American passport, you're an American.
Right.
How many people do we have? How many people do we have of theirs here? We
don't really know.
Does that ever come up? Does that ever?
Well, I read about 2 this morning in the New York Times.
Yeah. You hear about it. I mean, there's not necessarily. It's not like Guantanamo where they know how many are still left there. I think there are 35 still left there. I mean, U.S. doesn't like drug cases to begin with.
Correct.
You mentioned he broke the law. Even though it was a minor. He brought cannabis into the country.
Yes.
Regardless of a prescription. I mean, he'd been around a long time. He'd been there for 10, 12 years.
Mm-hmm.
He didn't think it was, but he would know
during the Sochi Olympics and the World Cup, they allowed that.
Yeah.
So I think that And I wonder if this informant also said, you know what, don't worry about it. That's just kind
you
of
don't
the
know.
feeling. That's just the feeling that I get, that maybe he was somehow misinformed as
A false sense of security.
Yes.
Well, and there's also, the Russian angle on this,
Right.
which is, they're part of this hostage diplomacy has been on the rise globally everywhere.
Sure.
They've been getting, if you listen to, one side of the political spectrum,
Right.
they've been getting good deals for them, and they don't want to put all their chips on the table.
But this tactic is as old as time.
Right, of course.
Yeah.
I mean, it's been going on forever and ever.
Yeah.
But they don't want to put all their chips on the table. They want to keep some. And unfortunately,
Right. Well,
Mark
but
is one of the
Mark
chips
is
they kept.
but one of the chips. But I mean, he's
He's not an important chip.
he's not an important chip.
No.
And I think that if the U.S. would have said, "Hey, listen, give us the school
Teacher, right.
We want the school teacher out."
It could have been. I mean, you have no idea. You can just speculate wildly. I mean,
Right.
they could have said, give us the school teacher. They said, well, then you got to give us 4 more people or 3 more.
Yeah,
and they would have said, well, we're not going to.
Well, especially when you have a Russian dissident who's
Right. Staying there.
feels that it is his duty to remain in prison.
Right.
That's
Right.
killer. That
Well,
just
the other thing you
kills me.
mentioned, which comes up, and again, we're all just
Speculating.
Speculate. They were under the umbrella of the embassy.
Right.
So tag the embassy by tagging the school.
Right.
Well, yeah, they really discredited the school, of which it's closed now.
Right, it's closed.
It's done.
It's done. They wanted that out. They didn't like their oligarchs' kids and
Right.
and other people being influenced
not.
by the Anglo-American school.
Yeah. Right.
They even changed their name at one point. They're just using their initials, right? It was called
AAS.
AAS. So they took a shot at him, but also, look, they got the
Right,
school
right.
closed down. So, I mean, it's hard to...
Did you ever go over there to visit him?
I didn't. We were planning. My sister and I were planning to go together in 22.
Oh, gosh.
And my sister had been. My sister studied Russian in high school and then was preparing. So she had been studying Russian that whole previous year in preparation for us going to Russia.
Right. I mean, there's also another pathway which generally doesn't work in Russia, which is the pathway of humanitarian grounds, right?
Yeah, which is laughable,
Right.
because Russia
Right.
has never released anyone on humanitarian grounds,
Right.
and so why? It's almost insulting.
Of course.
And even if they were going to release someone on humanitarian grounds, they still require a trade.
A trade of some
Right.
sort.
Mm-hmm.
Does he get medical attention there at all? Is there a doctor that gets this? Because he has medical issues.
Yeah,
That's
he's
why he was
got
bringing the
pretty serious
marijuana.
So he has spent 4 months in the penal colony hospital, which
It's not like any hospital we have here. I can tell you that based on my experience. It's like a private part of the barracks.
it's when I talked to him before he went in, he was like, he really, really, really didn't want to go.
Yeah.
And, this is where I might be getting into some deeper water.
Yeah, let's
So
not
I'm
talk about it, but let me just share that, based on my
and I'll tell you, in terms of the penal colony hospital,
right.
he has received hundreds of injections, hundreds of pills, thousands of pills possibly, and he does not speak Russision.
Right. Doesn't know what he's getting.
He doesn't know what he's getting. And
How do you know this?
He's told me this.
Got it.
And and this last time he was there, he was given an ultrasound of his liver. I'm not even certain of that. And I think that it really genuinely alarmed him. Mm-hmm. So he got out of the hospital in quotation marks on the 21st of July, and then this, 10 days later, this giant swap happens. And
he's
this
not part of it.
historic swap happens, and he is not part of it. It was just,
It's hard to take.
Yeah. He is shut down right now.
Right. The Russian medical system is, you wouldn't even consider it a medical system. They used to have ambulances that would be around Moscow, and all they have in them is basically a place to lie down and an oxygen tank, and that's it. Mm-hmm. There's very little. Right. And he's absolutely right. I mean, you have no idea what they're giving them, or why they're giving it to them, or you can't necessarily believe that the doctor in the penal colony is well trained, or well, you don't have no idea.
Right.
Well, I don't think he's seen a doctor. I think he's seen a lot of nurses.
Right.
I don't know.
And even doctors over there are different than doctors here, for example. A doctor there is more like a PA, really. It's a surgeon that's really gotten the extra training that would be equivalent to a doctor here.
Sure.
So they used to make an argument, well, more than 50% of our doctors are women, and so we're a balanced society. But then you looked at what their training was,
right,
and it was nurse training.
Yeah.
You had to be designated a surgeon or a specialist in some area to actually have full medical training.
Right.
So it's you have no idea what's going on in that particular area. You're continuing to apply whatever pressure you can, writing letters, talking to the administration. It's become.
We haven't talked to the administration. I mean, we've talked to them twice.
Right.
It's been well over a year ago now. I mean, it's not like we have regular communication, which is also the other part of the designation. Well, the designation does a whole array of things. It gets outside medical attention for Mark, mental health.
Right. So is that the next step, pushing for that to get that done?
We're still pushing for that. We're still pushing that. It would get my my sister-in-law and nephews any mental health treatment that they would need. It would help us. It would provide funding for us to advocate for Mark in Washington.
Right.
It would do a lot. It would go a long way.
And is that what the lawsuit's going to be focused on, trying to get him that designation?
Yes, it was an equal protection under the law.
Let's do this. Let's take a quick break. Our guest is Anne Fogel. Back after these words. Arnie, we are back with our guest, Anne Fogel.
So just as a recapitulation, Anne's brother, Marc Fogel, has been incarcerated in a penal colony in Russia for over 1,000 days. He was not part of the prisoner swap that was announced on August 1st, and everyone is still trying to work on getting him released. What can our listeners do to get more informed, or to help out, or to participate, or share their knowledge?
What can your Missoula community do?
What can the Missoula community
The first thing is easy. Say his name, talk about him.
Right.
Like, let people know that this is happening.
Right.
Second thing would be to write to President Biden and ask him to have him designated as wrongfully detained.
Right.
And then prioritize him in the next swap to bring him home.
And there's a website for this, right?
freemarkfogel.net is the website that we have established for Mark to maintain pressure on our government to make sure that he is prioritized. And I would love it if people did that. There are signs for sale that you can put in your front yard.
Great. And that's Mark, M-A-R-C.
M-A-R-C, Fogel, F-O-G-E-L.
M-A-R-C-F-O-G.
freemarkfogel.net.
.net. And we both appreciate your time and the generosity.
I can't thank you enough for having me.
Your cause is worth fighting for sure.
Thank you.
Without question, yeah. And this is where the Missoula community could be helpful, right?
Yes.
So, anyway, thank you for your time. Arnie, I'll see you next Sunday.
Next Sunday, Scott. Thanks.
Thank you for listening to What Do You Know?
I can't wait for the next show, Scott.
I'm excited too, Arnie. If you'd like to suggest a guest, send me an email at scottrichman@townsquaremedia.com. We'll see you next week. And thanks for listening to Newstalk KGVO.